Welcome to Study Session 11, African Response to the French Invasion of West Africa. Introduction. In this session, you will learn about the European invasion of West Africa. Two European nations were predominantly active in West Africa during our period. These were France and Great Britain. These two nations had the largest colonies in this region of the continent. Two others, which did not acquire large areas, were Germany and Portugal. Our discussion in this lecture will center on how the people of West Africa, particularly Africans in those areas where the French were active, responded to the French invasion of their territories. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this session, you should be able to 1. Discuss how French penetrated into West Africa. 2. Explain how Tukolo resisted French invasion. 3. Discuss why Tukolo resistance failed. 4. Explain how Samori Touré resisted French invasion and why his resistance failed. Terminology. Resistance. Military action of holding firm against the enemy advance. Group action in opposition to those in power. Group action to overthrow occupation force. French penetration of West Africa. The French penetration of West Africa was initially peaceful. The French had, at first, concerned themselves with trade. Between the 17th and the 19th centuries, French activities had grown tremendously. The French had established warehouses and garrisoned forts on the banks of the river Senegal and its tributaries. They had had middlemen on whom they relied for trade, protection, and link with the interior. They had also had social relations in form of marriages or concubinages with Africans in their areas of operation. The offspring of the marriages or concubinages was known as mulattoes or métis, through which the French influence grew immediately. Apart from this, the French, in the interest of peaceful trade, often intervened by helping to settle local disputes. In this way, they gradually became involved in local politics. French trade and local politics in West Africa. As their commercial interests grew, the French began to dictate the terms of trade so as to secure favorable conditions for themselves. They produced conflicts between Africans in order to control trade and eradicate conflicts that might arise in doing so. The French desired to control the political life of the states in the region of their operation. This desire met with stiff resistance by the Senegambians, who fought the French between 1830 and 1854. The greatest resistance came from Tukolo Empire under Alhaj Omar and Samori Touré's empire. Tukolo response to European invasion. French penetration of the Senegambia area coincided with the period of Tukolo expansion. The Tukolo imperial expansion conflicted with the French political ambition to control the whole area. Therefore, before 1881, the Tukolo and the French engaged in bitter struggle. Tukolo response to European invasion. The former fighting to retain the sovereignty of their empire, and also to prevent the latter from taking political control of the Senegambia area. In 1881, the French signed a treaty with Sheku Amadu, who had succeeded Umar after the latter's death. The treaty was signed at Segu. They were not to infringe on Tukulor's sovereignty. This treaty, which recognized Tukulor sovereignty, gave the Tukulor some respite to continue to expand their territory. It also gave the French time to gather enough strength for eventual and decisive attack on the Tukulor. The latter themselves seemed to be aware of this, for they were quoted as saying, "We like the French, but do not trust them. They, on the other hand, trust us, but do not like us." In spite of the Tukulor lack of confidence in the French, Hamadu refused to form alliance with Samori Touré against the invaders. By 1886, the French had negotiated a treaty with Samori and consequently isolated the Tukulor. By 1890, they felt strong enough to launch attack on Hamadu's empire. Using heavy artillery, they captured Segu, the capital of the empire. Hamadu escaped to Nioro. He was pursued in 1883. Jani, Masina, and all other Amadu's territory fell to the French. Amadu fled to Sokoto, his mother's hometown, where he died in 1898. Factors responsible for the failure of Tukulor resistance. A number of factors explain the failure of the Tukulor resistance against the French invasion of their territory. Firstly, all African states jealously guarded and protected their sovereignty. Secondly, religious differences prevented unity among Africans. Thirdly, the French seized the opportunity of lack of cooperation between Hamadu and Samori Touré to isolate the Tukulor. The belated attempt to form anti-French alliance by the states in Senegambia between 1889 and 1893 was ineffective. Samori resistance to French invasion. Another empire that rose in arms against the French invaders was Samori Touré's empire. Samori Touré was a Mandinka warrior who carved out an empire for himself in the second half of the 19th century. Samori first clashed with the French in 1882 when they raided a town deep inside his empire. In 1885, he defeated the French and prevented them from taking control of his gold-producing area of Baibor. The defeat was so decisive that the French could not retaliate. Instead, they signed a treaty of peace with him at Bisandugu in 1886. The treaty allowed the French time to recoup because between 1891 and 1892, Samori Touré resisted them until 1898, when he was exiled to Gabon, where he died in 1900. Samori's strategies of resistance. What are the factors which led to the long resistance, and why did he fail eventually? Samori Touré was able to resist the French for a long time before he finally surrendered. Reasons for his long resistance are not far-fetched. Samori Touré was one of the African leaders who used diplomacy to combat European aggression. Secondly, Samori Touré possessed modern weapons which he acquired from other Europeans who were rivals of the French. Thirdly, Samori employed modern war tactics such as ambush, surprise attack, scorched earth, and mass movement of people. His army was organized to carry out these methods effectively. Fourthly, Samori's resourcefulness sustained his resistance for a long time. The resourcefulness was exemplified in his good administration of the empire, which ensured loyalty to him, both from his soldiers and the populace. Fifthly, Samori adopted a policy of avoidance. Each time he had encounter with the French, he would evacuate his people to areas far away from the reach of the enemy. Reasons for the failure of Samori's resistance. Despite the above activities of Samori, he was eventually forced to submission and his empire was taken over by the French. The French exploited the political situation in the Senegambia area to their advantage. In the course of building his empire, Samori, like the Tukulo, had trampled on the independence of some other neighboring states, which sought every available opportunity to fight for their aggressors. Religious difference was also another weakness which the French exploited. They consequently signed a treaty of protection with the French and remained an ally of the invaders. The coalition of these internal and external enemies weakened Samori's resistance. After Samori had been defeated, the French turned against their collaborators and forced them to submission. The French repeated their pattern of allying with African collaborators in the conquest of other areas in West Africa. Summary. In this study session, you have learned that 1. African reaction to French invasion in West Africa varied. 2. Some states resisted French invasion by means of arms, others collaborated with the invaders. 3. Disunity was prevalent in these conquered territories as a result of political rivalries and conflicts of territorial expansion. 4. Religious differences also played significant roles in this disunity. 5. The French exploited these differences to conquer both the resistors and the collaborators. End of study session 11. Thanks for listening.